Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
Let the dogs out. Who let the dogs out? Who?
Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com. Your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. Always available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Always available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Little bit of tech issues off the front. That's always great. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. The transfer portal closing disaster at the University of Florida, which we'll dig into. And also yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of Phillip Fulmer stepping aside as the athletic director asked to step aside, as was the firing of Jeremy Pruitt. So we'll get into that. What is his lasting legacy? And it pretty much lies with the Lady Vols. So a lot to get to, including more movement in the transfer portal, which I don't think is incredibly surprising, Caleb. And as we start to break down what the SEC has done, I don't think it's hardly a surprise before we get to Tennessee's class that Ole Miss brought in a couple of transfers. That's the way Lane Kiffin wants to build that program for now. And I don't know that he has a bunch of choice, because I don't know that Ole Miss can compete with the upper echelon of the SEC. So I think it's going to be have to be transfer portal and see what happens. So for now, Ole Miss picks up 2 defensive backs that are entering the portal: sophomore Tasheem Johnson and freshman Davison Igawasuin. I did the best I could. That's according to Max Olson of The Athletic. But when we start to look at what Tennessee has done, wanted to break down the commitments that Tennessee has and the transfers and the signees and the enrollees and all that good stuff. So we've got a firm grasp now, as people can still transfer in theoretically, but the way it works is you can't enter the portal anymore. So in other words, pretty slim pickings from this point forward. Good morning, Caleb. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing today, Dave?
I'm well. But your thoughts on what Tennessee in general, before we start to break down each player, picked up in the transfer portal. What did you think?
I thought they did what they needed to do. We're seeing that Josh Heupel really focuses on addressing needs in the transfer portal more than anything else. He did that particularly on the offensive line with Andre Carrick and John Campbell. I'm sure they're going to have competition there. Obviously, the flashy pick was the Oregon transfer wide receiver. Sorry, I can't talk this morning. Oregon transfer wide receiver Dante Thornton. I think that was really the big standout. That's like I said, that's Dante Thornton going to Tennessee's offense is, for you Harry Potter fans, is if Voldemort could have ever gotten the Elder Wand to work for him. It's like
What that means. But you did use a Kevin Durant
yes
comparison that made a lot of sense.
Yes, it's Kevin Durant going to join the already insanely efficient Golden State offense. And so obviously that is the splashy pickup. I think I don't think Tennessee's done in the portal. And what I mean is, there's 2 Ole Miss DBs you mentioned that entered the portal. I think there's a chance Tennessee might go for one of them, if I'm going to be honest. Dave, you and I both know there's no way Tennessee and Josh Heupel can be satisfied with their secondary right now, even with this recruiting class coming in. They need help. That's where they need the most help, badly.
No, I agree. Let's take a look at the transfers that are coming in. And again, Tennessee, just because the portal's closed, it doesn't mean they can't pick up more guys. But at this point, you would think this is pretty much your list, because all of these guys have been culled through. So
breaking news, Tennessee picked up a transfer cornerback from BYU as we're doing the show right now.
Okay. Tell us more about him.
Gabe Judilali. He entered the portal last month. It was his second consecutive offseason from the portal, entering the portal. He's 6'2", 185 pounds. he had taken visits to Baylor and UCLA. Looks like so that's Tennessee's second transfer portal pickup, because remember they picked up a linebacker, Keenan Peely. He started at before BYU last year. He actually started at Vanderbilt in 2021. So he's gone from Vanderbilt to BYU to back to the SEC to Tennessee. I don't know if that's a red flag, but he has started in the SEC, and so looks like Josh Heupel has focused on uh, beefing up the secondary. Yeah, this happened literally as we were getting the show off the ground this morning with their technical issues.
I don't necessarily think that it's a red flag anymore when a guy transfers multiple times. That used to be a really big red flag. You want to go before that, red flag was going to junior college, but I believe we're past that point. I think it's just part of business. So one, two, it'd be two total transfers from Vanderbilt to BYU and then BYU to Tennessee. I don't think that's a red flag any longer. I did for a long time, but I don't think that's a red flag. Now, as far as transfers coming in that we have a better grasp on, since that just happened, let me run through them and hear what I'll tell you what I'm hearing. John Campbell, I think he's got a long ways to go before he plays for Tennessee. We'll see. Omar Norman Lott. John Campbell, by the way, was the offensive lineman from Maryland. Then you have Omar Norman Lott, 6'2", 295 pounds, defensive lineman. I have every reason to think that he could be in the rotation. Dante Thornton, who you mentioned is the flashy one, the wide receiver who adds to a group that already has Squirrel White, already has Ramel Keaton and Brew McCoy. So the rich get richer at that position. Keenan Pill is one that I think is a little underestimated by some Tennessee fans. I think he's a good Mike linebacker that can get the job done. He's going to know where he is supposed to be. Is he going to go sideline to sideline? Probably not. I hear great things about Andre Carrig, the offensive lineman. I think he's going to be a player. Charles Campbell, at 5'9", 175 pounds, a kicker. Goodness knows the Cowboys proved on Monday night you could always use another kicker, and he's able to step in there. And then McCallan Castles, I believe, was the very first transfer, a tight end out of California. And McCallan Castles is a guy that you would expect to step in and play right away, as much as they use two tight ends. And in case you didn't notice during the season, it was either Jacob Warren or Princeton Fant in the game. So they were sort of co-starters. And I think McCallan Castles is expected to step in there. Now, you might see Warren be a bigger part of the offense like Princeton Fant was, kind of an elevation. And that's part of the reason why he came back, I would imagine. But with Castles, you need a guy that's going to be able to step in and play those valuable drives and snaps, because they don't want to sub from one guy to another because it slows down the tempo. So McCallan Castles, I think, is a significant pickup. If I had to rate them in terms of will play, won't play, based off what I've heard, I would say Carrig, number one, will be an impact player. I think Dante Thornton and Keenan Pill, for totally different reasons, I would kind of have tied at second in that regard. And then McCallan Castles absolutely has to play. So we're going to be talking Vols throughout the program and the SEC portal and what's going on. And we encourage you to hit that like button, thumbs up. It helps us bring much more into the fold in terms of our audience, and we appreciate that. And be sure and support our advertisers. Speaking of, Zach England of Best and Brock, Zach's got your back. Zach England of Best and Brock is phenomenal when it comes to standing toe-to-toe with the insurance company attorneys that don't want you to get what you're supposed to get. So that's Zach England, Best and Brock. Zach's got your back, personal injury attorney in Chattanooga that will take care of you. So what are your thoughts on the group that Tennessee brings in through the transfer portal? Who stands out to you? Who do you have question marks about? Your thoughts, Caleb?
So I'm with you on McCallan Castles. He is one that he fills a void that has to be filled, particularly with Miles Campbell now having transferred. I think Miles Campbell found his new destination yesterday, by the way. But that I guess you would call it tight end H-back position, maybe, because it's kind of like a mixture of both. I think McCollum Castles is a better fit for that than Jacob Warren, who seems more like the goal line tight end. Jacob Warren seems like more like the bigger target when you get inside the red zone and the blocking tight end. So you're right. He feels a direct need. Omar Norman Lott is going to be in the rotation. I don't know if he's going to start, but I know that he's going to be in the rotation. I'm pretty sure on the defensive line. Dante Thornton, it's not that Tennessee needed him, but God, I don't know what his stats are going to look like next year, but that's just a scary, scary situation. Thornton in Tennessee's offensive 6'5" slot guy. That's the craziest thing still to me that Tennessee was able to get him, but I understand why he went. Keenan Peely, I'm with you. Probably not a sideline to sideline guy. You're probably right, but I think what I saw from Tim Banks this year with his scheming, he likes to do a lot of different blitz packages, and isn't it a lot more north-south running for the linebackers than it is sideline to sideline? I didn't really see Jeremy Banks move laterally that much this past year.
I mean, it's always nice to be able to flip your hips and be able to get sideline to sideline, but I agree. It's a vertical defense, so I don't think that's as much as an issue. I think Peely will step in and be the guy who's kind of like the mainstay run stopper that you've got. And the other thing too, and I don't mind stereotyping in this, we're not supposed to stereotype anymore, but the guys with the background of the Polynesian background, I have yet to see one that didn't play incredibly hard and passionate. So, I mean, I think having those guys on your team, and I've talked to Polynesian recruiting analysts who say that's just kind of the mentality of those guys. So, listen, if you got one of those guys on your team, I remember JT Mapu was one that gave every single ounce on every single play. So I think that's what you're looking for out of a guy like that, and I think he'll be able to give you that.
I agree. It's funny you say that because it's Keenan Peely is Mormon. He did a mission, and Mapu, I remember JT Mapu was when he left school for 2 years to do a mission in the middle of his Tennessee career. I'm not devoutly religious, but I do have a belief that people who are devoutly religious are oftentimes at peace to a certain degree, and it kind of allows them to play harder. I don't know if that makes sense, but they're mentally at peace at more than a lot of other people. And that's if you're Mormon, that's if you're Southern Protestant like Reggie White, and it's or Tim Tebow for that matter. But I agree. There seems to be you see a lot of that with those guys. Jesse Mahalona, that's true. Rest in peace. Passed away in a car crash about 13 years ago, but played really hard for Tennessee at defensive tackle. I remember.
He was phenomenal, and I'm probably, because I'm getting older, combining some of those memories. But certainly Jesse Mahalona, how many shoestring tackles did he have?
Oh my gosh.
Just more, and that was just pure effort more than anything else. He was phenomenal. Travis saying pairing up with Warren and talking about the Castles. It's a great pickup. And Travis says it's impossible to replace Fant. I thought Fant was one of the best natural athletes on the team. So yes, it's impossible to replace a guy who's going to line up at fullback, who's going to be able to do all those things. You and I may differ a little bit. You said something that stuck out to me. I don't see Warren as just the goal line tight end. I just think it was coincidence he wasn't more involved in the passing game because he wasn't in when those plays were called. I think he's pretty athletic as a pass receiver. You?
Oh yeah. I mean, he can be I meant to say red zone. I saw him more as a red zone tight end because he's the guy that can catch the touchdown passes. Where if you're on the 20 and you need a fade into the end zone, no one can guard Warren in the end zone. That's what I meant. And he's in between the hashes. I think he does a lot more of the blocking. And so I agree. He's athletic. I didn't want to say that. I think Jacob Warren is perfect for the system. I just think that, I'm not sure Warren is the guy that you can line up at H-back like you could do with Princeton Fant or, sneak him into White. I don't know if you could sneak Warren into White out the way, they oftentimes did with Princeton Fant a lot of times. And I'm wondering if they're going to do that with McCollum Castles. By the way, I got a person of Polynesian descent. I forgot who was not the best at giving his all. And that was Albert Toyana. And
I go back to Albert, and I thought you might mention his name. I thought he had heavy feet from the get-go. I didn't think he was naturally talented, played left tackle. But I also think that was a year in which he hit what should have been his best year, where there was just coaching issues across the board. And at one point I was told that he left practice early and quit the team, and they had to beg him to come back. And there was another point where he supposedly spat at a reporter. And I recall we got the parents had the video, and he spat on the ground in front of the reporter, did not spit on the camera person. Not a reporter, a camera person. And I saw the video because I remember that Toina's calling me and saying, for whatever reason, halfway to Gatlinburg was where they got a hotel, and meeting them at Country Inns and Suites in the conference room and watching the tape. So I thought he was a bit misunderstood. I thought that he was a guy that they just threw off the team pretty easily because they wanted to make a statement. But he wasn't a great player. I will say this. He was a very average offensive lineman, just his play alone. But I thought he kind of got a bad rap.
That might be fair.
Leaving.
I thought the whole offensive line that year in 2005, we always talk about the quarterback issues, but I just remember the offensive line seemed to be completely out of shape that year.
Well, and also Albert Toina was one of those guys that you fall in love with. If you're a Phillip Fulmer guy who loves his Jimmys and Joes more than the X's and O's, you see a guy who's 345 pounds, and I think he was like 607, or he's 6'7". That is the guy that you fall in love with if you're a talent guy, but that's not the guy who's necessarily got great feet and is able to move around. Portions of the program brought to you by Vols Automotive Group. Vols Automotive Group right there on Calhoun, the epicenter of car shopping and car service. They will take care of you. They want, they need, and they appreciate your business. That's Viles Automotive Group. So certainly check them out. Viles Automotive Group, just great integrity, and they are absolutely fantastic. Elias saying story I got was that there was a secret player meeting leading to an ultimatum directed at the coaching staff. Just an absolute trainer. Elias helped me during the break. I don't know what you're referring to. I don't know what you're referring to. That's the Jeremy Banks situation. If you're referring to the Albert Toina situation, I can tell you the insides and outsides of both, I believe, but we'll do that right after this. Stay tuned. 2 minutes. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Off the Hook Sports, brought to you in part by GIAPlantoday.com, Guardian Investment Advisors. That's GIAPlantoday.com. They are absolutely phenomenal because they are able to, via video teleconferencing, give you the type of investment advice that you just can't get locally. So they can do it on a national level. They are phenomenal. So call Gary and the group, tell them Off the Hook Sports sent you, and do it all online and figure out not only where your money is going, but why it's going there. GIAPlantoday.com. Back in 2 minutes. Off the Hook Sports
has risen to the highest level in over 40 years, according to the April 2022 U.S. inflation calculator. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings due to inflation? Simply stated, if the cost of goods and services are 8% higher and you're only earning 4% in your investments, that money buys you less of what you need. Right now is the time to act. Call Guardian Investment Advisors today.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant.
It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare. Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Elias, help me out. Are you talking about the Jeremy Banks situation or Toena? Totally confused here. And then we can address that. But I do want to address a Tennessee 2 years ago this week made the move from Phillip Fulmer to Danny White and made the move away from Jeremy Pruitt. We all know the many things that went wrong with that. Okay, so Elias is referring to the 2005 situation with Toena. I can tell you that he was kicked off the team very hastily because there was a lot of pressure on the coaching staff. And I can tell you that the person that I talked to within Tennessee's athletic department, when I said I'd actually seen the tape and Toena's parents videoed everything he had. So he spat at the ground in front of the television camera person. It was not a situation where he spat on him. Now, I tried to interview the television camera person, and he did not want to be reported or quoted or talked to, or he did not want to be a part of the report. Maybe he just didn't want to be a part of the story. As a reporter, you don't want to be a part of the story. But when you throw that allegation out there, and I'm defending Albert Toena from 20 years ago, I think you have to back it up in some respect, and you can't just put it on social media. And it got really entangled on my end because that person's wife actually happened to be a client of the radio station, so that I worked at as well. So I don't think that Albert Toena should have been thrown off. I think things were going downhill quickly, and it was a scapegoat move. That's based off the tape that I saw. And I remember calling the person who was pretty high up, and we may be talking about him here in a second. And I called and I said, well, they have tape. I've seen the tape. And it was, bleep it. What's on the tape, Hooker? And I said, doesn't look like he spit on him. And that was a situation. So I think that it was just a knee-jerk reaction to a season going downhill, and Albert Toena was thrown off the team. That being said, I don't know why we're stuck on Toena, because he was probably the one Polynesian player that wasn't the greatest in the world. After we talk about Mapu and some
Mahalona.
of the Mahalona was just unbelievably fantastic. And so, all right, let's get to this. Mike Hamilton was drowning. You're right. And so was and I think the coaching staff, to a large extent, the football department was drowning and trying to keep themselves above water. So I think Toena just absolutely was. I mean, his parents were crying when I interviewed him. I think he was the one that was the easiest to get rid of because he allegedly spit on a cameraman. That's kind of back the beginning of cameras are everywhere, Caleb, like body cameras for police officers. Nowadays, you can't make an allegation or do anything without there being some sort of video evidence, either in your favor or to the contrary. That's just, there are cameras everywhere.
Yeah, it's that was why it was hilarious a couple of years ago. And I want to say up front because I'm from Memphis, I'm a fan of Penny Hardaway's. But when he was making up those stories about his players, John with Tennessee's players, and the first Tennessee basketball Memphis game, and it totally did not was not consistent with what everybody saw on camera. This was an ESPN nationally televised game, and the fact that he thought that he could, and I don't know if he lied or if his players lied to him. But the fact that either of them thought that this wasn't all going to be caught on cameras was hilariously ridiculous.
Yeah. So that's what's going to happen nowadays. And Caleb and I were talking about how players can't just say, the police can't just tell them, hey, go take off. I know you've been drinking a little bit. Go ahead and go home because I'm a big Tennessee fan. Those, or an Alabama fan or whoever, those are just harder to get away with. All right. So, this week is the 2-year anniversary of Phillip Fulmer being replaced as athletic director by Danny White. So I wrote a column in this on Off the Hook Sports, and if you want to check it out, we would love for you to. But we're going to pretty much break it down right here. So Phillip Fulmer, ultimately, Caleb, we can both agree, is judged just like any athletic director in the SEC, with the exception of maybe Kentucky. And that is, it's football, and then everybody else is kind of nice, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we all know that Phillip Fulmer hired Jeremy Pruitt. Here's a situation where I don't think that Phillip Fulmer was tied in. I think a couple of people told him no. I think some people were afraid to work for a coach that was an athletic director. That was very common in the 70s and 80s, but it hasn't been in the decades more recently. And Phillip Fulmer was a guy that stepped in, that the reputation was, be it fair or not, that he liked Phillip Fulmer maybe just a little bit more than the university. So he was going to look out for himself. So I don't know how many coaches told him no before Jeremy Pruitt finally said yes. But Caleb, I'll tell you this, I believe it was more than a couple. And I think you settled on Jeremy Pruitt. And you brought up a good point. Maybe he saw a little bit of himself in Jeremy Pruitt from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. I think he may have been told no by a couple of coaches, but I think the profile of the couple of coaches was Jeremy Pruitt's profile. And I remember Phillip Fulmer in the press conference talking about, I remember him saying, being interviewed after Jeremy Pruitt's press conference, saying, talking about the toughness in the SEC and the intensity and stuff that kind of comes with a defensive coach. And I always said, offensive line coaches, that's the one position that if you're coaching, it's very similar to being a defensive coach, where it's all about the toughness and the line of scrimmage and, blue collar football or whatever. And I think Fulmer was very biased to that style. I knew when Fulmer got the job that, Tennessee was talking to Mike Leach. I knew there was no way Tennessee was getting Mike Leach at that point, because I know that Phillip Fulmer does not believe in any sort of creativity with offense. Like you said, he believes Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's all day, every day. And I think that I think Fulmer also saw, remember that year was Kirby Smart's second year at Georgia, and Kirby Smart was going undefeated at Georgia, going to the national championship game. And I think he thought, oh, Jeremy Pruitt's the next Kirby Smart. Let's take a chance on him. And yeah, it was a bad hire. I think that doesn't mean it couldn't have worked out. You and I know there's some bad hires that sometimes work out. And
sure.
But I think Fulmer went for the tough-minded defensive coach who can recruit at a high level. And I think you and I both agree, this was pre-NIL. Tennessee, given the fact that Georgia was dominant, Clemson was dominant, Alabama was dominant, they probably needed a creative offensive mind to stay ahead of the curve around that time, because they weren't just going to out-recruit Georgia or Alabama at that time. And with defensive coaches, you got to be able to out-recruit other guys, because defense is more about talent than scheming.
I agree with that. I also think that you're kind of looking at it from the perspective of who Phillip Fulmer wanted. He may have wanted Mike Leach, but you're probably right. He probably didn't. But it's the coaches that would have come under that circumstance. So I look at Danny White, who had success at Buffalo and Central Florida, And by comparison, here's a guy that if 3 people tell him no, he's got a 4th person on the list that he feels pretty confident with. I don't think Josh Heupel was necessarily the first choice at Tennessee coming from UCF. I think there were probably other guys. We'll never know. That's one of those things that never, ever gets released. But I don't know that Josh Heupel was the first choice, but that's fine. Maybe the first choice was Nick Saban to hire him away from Alabama just for conversational purposes. Okay, so he says no. Maybe the second choice is Kirby Smart to hire him away from Georgia for conversational purposes. However many people said no, however high you set your goals, it really doesn't matter because on the next level down, you were able to get a Josh Heupel who had a very solid resume and who was a guy that you thought coming in had something a little bit different that would work in the SEC. So I don't care if that's your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th choice on the list. You had that ready. Whereas Phillip Fulmer, what did he have ready? He had Jeremy Pruitt was his catch-all at the end of the day. And that was an incredibly bad hire. Be sure and hit that like button so we can bring more people in. If you haven't subscribed, we want you to do that. But the like button is fantastic because it brings more people into the conversation. Chuck saying it was his last choice to bring him in. I tend to agree with that. Comments from the message board brought to you by Zul Beer Company, xulbeer.com. Worldwide award-winning craft beer. A great place to park downtown. You'll enjoy it. You'll love it. And we're going to have an event there really soon. Looking forward to that. The official craft beer of the Off the Hook Sports. So my point is, it's not Phillip Fulmer's fault that he took the position that was offered to him. As a matter of fact, it was somewhat natural. He was a consultant already. It's the administration's fault for offering it to him. You know, Phillip Fulmer, I think we would all agree, just like most of us, we want what's best for us. And then I think with Phillip Fulmer, second was what's best for the University of Tennessee. And I think he wanted to achieve both of those goals. And I think he thought he did with Jeremy Pruitt. But the bottom line is there's just not a guy that's going to be tied in like he was not if you don't have an administration background. You can't spend your whole life teaching young men how to play the offensive line and be expected to be tied in. I use the comparison of this. How tied in was Mike Hamilton when he hired Bruce Pearl? Nobody really knew who Bruce Pearl was at the time, but he was tied into basketball circles, maybe even more so than football circles. So you have to be tied into those circles, and you just don't snap your fingers and that happens. So I don't blame Phillip Fulmer for any of that as far as the hire goes. Maybe he did things to cover up for Jeremy Pruitt after. I don't know. But as far as his hires, and you look at them, it's Pruitt number one and everybody else. And then Kelly Harper is kind of the last, kind of one of the last coaches that could have elite success, I believe, out of the group. Because if you look at who he hired, you've got Eve Rackham, who's done a fine job with the Lady Vols in the NCAA tournament. And then you have Brenna Webb, who has captured 7 tournament titles and 6 individuals in golf. But at the end of the day, he's going to be judged on Jeremy Pruitt and to a smaller extent, Kelly Harper. So he just was put in a position that there was no way he was going to have elite success. No way.
I agree. And one of the things that, and you're right, when it comes to being tied in, there's understanding the nature and the structure of your program and what you're going for. One of the things that Danny White understands very well is that if you look at his hires, and Danny White's very big on this, everywhere he's been, he doesn't hire a guy and say, we're looking to build this program up in 3 years. He hires a guy that he knows can make a splash the first year he's there. Danny White's and I actually kind of believe this is the way to hire too. If you're at a place like Tennessee and you're a program that's on fire like Tennessee was in 2021, his philosophy was, I need a guy that's going to make a splash the very first year, that's going to really invigorate the fan base. And that's going to help not just with ticket sales and important stuff like that, but that is going to help with recruiting. Because as you know, this, you make a first year splash, that, the snowball kind of starts. Look at the first year splash Bruce Pearl made. when he was hired. And yes, Josh Heupel went 7-6, but I think we all agree going 7-6 and given what Tennessee was expected to do, that was a first year splash. That was a huge deal that happened. And I think that Danny White knew that. And I don't think a football coach from the 90s who believes X's and O's, Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's is really going to approach it from that perspective. And
No, I agree. And I think the Dave Clawson hire in 2008 was clearly an indication that Phillip Fulmer still wanted to be involved, that Phillip Fulmer, he was going to have a say. I remember the stories of Phillip Fulmer showing up to practice, which technically was an NCAA violation, but he showed up to Jeremy Pruitt's practice. And imagine, Caleb, you had an editor or somebody with your positions, and they're looking over your shoulder the entire time. I don't care if they're supportive and they're telling you you're fantastic. That is, at the end of the day, going to affect your performance. I firmly believe that. Chuck said it was Fulmer's last choice to bring him in. Totally agree with that. Now, Travis says something that is intriguing to me. Anyone was better than Schiano, therefore Pruitt was accepted. Now, there obviously was the Schiano mess with the Penn State thing, but to this day, it hasn't been proven that he had any knowledge of the atrocities that were going on at Penn State. And I would offer this too. Schiano at the time was a much better candidate. Now we've seen what's happened since. Much better candidate than Pruitt. We would all agree with that, right?
we have to remember, I don't think it was just the Penn State thing with Schiano, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think that we all know if Nick Saban had the loose tie to the scandal that Schiano had, nobody would have cared. I think it was a combination of that. Schiano's resume wasn't, he had a 1-11-2 season at Rutgers with Ray Rice, but the minute, he lost it. Remember this, Tennessee had just fired Butch Jones. Schiano got blown out by Butch Jones when he was at Rutgers in 2011. And there were also some stories of him being a bit of a snake when he was in the NFL. He
was a snake in recruiting too. I don't doubt that at all. I think a lot of the coaches are snakes, but as far as a resume as a head coach in the NFL compared to Jeremy Pruitt, never been a head coach anywhere.
I agree.
Coming in the door, that if the Penn State thing didn't exist, which I think was a bit.
Also, let's not forget though, John Curry tried to sneak the Schiano hire in at a time when nobody was paying attention. It was on a Sunday during the NFL. It was very clear that he was trying to sneak in the Schiano hire before the press could really get a hold of it and do anything. And the reason he was trying to do that is because, one, let's just call it what it is. The Haslams were pulling his strings, and they loved Jimmy Haslam for some reason, loved Schiano.
Yep.
And it was because they knew it was going to be a letdown because the fans wanted John Gruden first, which I think they dodged a bullet not getting John Gruden. And they wanted Dan Mullen second. But because Curry was so late firing, and we know this, he was so late firing Butch Jones that Florida was already talking with Dan Mullen, and there was no way Tennessee was going to get him at that point. And that whole fiasco goes back to Tennessee took way too long to fire Butch Jones. We all knew he was a disaster of a coach by September of that year, and they didn't fire him until the end of October.
No, agreed. And I thought that the Schiano move was a little bit sneaky. I don't know why they fell in love with him. I don't know why they felt like they had to do it on a sneaky level. Did they worry about the Penn State issues? Perhaps. As far as Dan Mullen, you talk about Tennessee not moving quick enough. Had they moved quick enough? Now, I still think Dan Mullen's a pretty good coach.
I do too.
But had they gotten Dan Mullen, they would have had to move quickly because they moved slowly, and then Florida got involved, and then it was over. Kind of similar to the way South Carolina was going to hire Kirby Smart, and Georgia said, whoa, we can't miss out on this guy. I don't know if you remember that story, but the South Carolina was ready to move on Kirby Smart. And Tennessee just didn't have great options after 2, 3, or 4. I don't know who their 2, 3, or 4 were, but I guarantee you Jeremy Pruitt wasn't 1, 2, or 3.
Wouldn't it have made more sense for Fulmer at that point to and if given what we know about Pruitt and given that he was a questionable hire at that point, wouldn't it have made more sense just to excite the fan base by hiring Team Martin as head coach and let him bring in a great staff to run the show? I mean, I'm not saying Team Martin would be a great coach. I'm just saying if you were going to make the uninspiring hire in Pruitt, at least Team Martin's a good recruiter.
I think in both cases you're talking about a carryover coach, a stability coach. Is that basically what you're saying? You're saying a stability coach to get you to the next coach who hopefully wins at the championship level. I mean, I guess I could see that. I haven't been told by anybody in coaching circles that T. Martin's ready for that type of position or even necessarily ready to run an entire offense. But yeah, I mean, you could make that argument. You could make a lot of arguments over Jeremy Pruitt, or you could make a lot of arguments over Greg Schiano.
Because that's definitely what Tennessee should have done in 2010 with Kippy Brown. They should have definitely made him head coach.
No question. It was fantastic the way they interviewed him after they had hired Derek Dooley. That was really high class. Sarcasm. The Andy Mason Group, nothing about sarcasm there. The Andy Mason Group, go to andymasonrealestate.com. andymasonrealestate.com is going to offer you over 40 years of experience in their office in real estate that is absolutely unbelievable. They live in the Powell Halls area, and they know Knoxville real estate inside and out. 2 simple business tenants. That's the best prices. That is also the best service. That's andymasonrealestate.com. Sign up now and get a new view of real estate. Somebody that cares for you, best prices, again, and best service. Back in 2 minutes, portions of the program brought to you by Bassey Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth the drive. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Calhoun Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker with you weekdays at 10 a.m. Or you can check us out on YouTube anytime. Also, don't forget we're on iHeart, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, the whole 9 yards. So check us out if you want to hear the audio version if you are on the go. So we drew straws, so to speak, as far as report cards for Tennessee's offense looking back at the 2022 season. And Caleb Calhoun drew the offensive straw, which means that the A button on his keyboard may not be working much longer. It's brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, City Heat and Air. cityheatandair.com, and Integrity Matters. That's City Heating and Air Conditioning. So, Caleb, your thoughts on Tennessee's offense? Let me run through those. I'll throw them at you, and you give me the report cards, as that is on offthehooksports.com right now. Also, let's update everybody who is listening live of the news that Tennessee pulls in another commitment. Can you give us a recap on that, please, sir?
Yes, BYU transfer quarterback Gabe Judy Lally has transferred to the Vols. He played at Vanderbilt from 2019 to 2021. 2018 to 2021, I think. Started 10 games in 2021. Then he transferred to BYU last year, appeared in every game, had 7 pass breakups. He is 6'2", 185. He is going back to the SEC, transferring to Tennessee with 1 year of eligibility. Joining Keenan Peely, the linebacker who transferred from BYU a month ago to Tennessee. I can't see him not starting for Tennessee off the bat next year. He's a 1 year of eligibility. Josh Heupel desperately needs an upgrade in his secondary. He would not have taken this guy if he wasn't expecting him to start immediately.
Agreed. Interesting cat. So that's a big pickup when the portal closes now. Now, again, the portal closes, but colleges can still take players. It just means you can't enter the portal until this spring window. So that's where we are on that. All right, let's take a look at a report card that's on offthehooksports.com. Let's start with tight end, for instance. Princeton Fant, very versatile. Jacob Warren, 12 catches for 163 yards. Your thoughts on the tight end? What grade did you give them?
I gave them an A. I mean, there might have been a couple of questions at times about run blocking, but for the most part, they really didn't do anything wrong. I mean, Princeton Fant I think he was 3rd on the team in touchdowns, I want to say, if you include all the rushing touchdowns. I think he was behind Jalen Hyatt and Jabari Small. He had 5 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns, and a passing touchdown. Jacob Warren, his stats dropped off a little bit from last year because he had 12 catches for 163 yards and no touchdowns. I think a lot of that was Tennessee did a lot more scoring in the red zone in 2021. We talk about Jacob Warren being a red zone tight end. They did a lot of their scoring this year from the 50-yard line. And so it's that, but overall I give them an A.
Very true. The offensive line I would have thought would have been a C at best, but they proved me wrong. They were very good.
Yes, they did. They got an A-. For me, the offensive line to me is proof that PFF grades are so overrated and don't make sense a lot of times, because if Tennessee's interior offensive line was constantly grading in the 50s during games this year for PFF grades, but anybody who watched them knew that they weren't in the 50s. Cooper Mays and Jerome Carvin and Javonte Spraggins did a heck of a job run blocking. Darnell Wright was incredible at right tackle. Tennessee was 45th in the country in fewest sacks per game allowed. That's not that bad. That's much better than they were the year before when they were one of the worst at getting sacked. I think a lot of that had to do with Hendon Hooker got a lot better at getting rid of the ball quickly. But when you use a quarterback's legs the way Josh Heupel did with Hooker, you're going to open yourself up to a few more sacks than your average team. So being 45th in sacks allowed, it's actually pretty impressive. And so I give the offensive line an A-.
Hard to give the running backs anything that doesn't start with an A. I thought Tennessee, and this, of course, goes back to the offensive line. Tennessee just did a fantastic job of running the football, which was overlooked by the national media, but we saw it each and every week.
Yeah, I gave them an A- too. The only reason I didn't give them an A, and maybe this is a little unfair, but Jabari Small did not average 5 yards a carry. He averaged just under that. And I feel like in college, great running backs should average 5 yards a carry. But outside of that, Jabari Small, Jalen Wright, and Dylan Sampson combined for over 2,000 total yards from scrimmage. I mean, what more can you ask for from those three? I mean, that's production that's Gerald Riggs and Cedric Houston 2004 production right there.
Wide receiver, A+. Can't go wrong with that. Quarterback, A+. It's really hard to give out any other grade with this group and what they were able to do.
Yeah, I just want to put something in perspective for people with quarterback. Hendon Hooker was a Heisman candidate this year with incredible stats. Joe Milton's efficiency numbers were actually better than Hooker's this year. That's insane. And by the way, Milton still hasn't thrown an interception since he's been at Tennessee. I don't know if people don't know that, or if people know that, but he still has not yet thrown an interception. The team as a whole threw 38 touchdowns and 3 picks. One of them was by Gaston Moore in like garbage time, so I don't even count that.
No.
And so quarterback play was amazing.
Chuck saying he wanted to introduce himself. He's Mike Stoll's older brother. Chuck, I know who you are, and give your mom my best and tell Mike Stoll, former Tennessee offensive lineman, I said hello. So appreciate you being a part of the program. We'll be with you each and every day at 10 o'clock. So if you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. Share as well. If you're on Facebook, that is absolutely fantastic. Portions of the program brought to you by Bassey Lawn and Garden. Man Alive is worth the drive. And if you're curious as to where you should watch NFL action, which, by the way, the San Francisco 49ers get, I believe it's 8 days to prepare for the Dallas Cowboys, who get 6. Not that I'm bitter. But if you want to watch NFL action, Big Orange Phillies is the place to do it. That is on Maynardville Pike. It is phenomenal, close to Maynardville. You've got a place to hang out. And also, it is very, very close to Halls and Powell and so on. So you're going to love Big Orange Phillies, great food. They've got darts. They've got billiards. They've got cornhole. They've got it all right there at Big Orange Phillies. Off the Hook Sports. Have a fantastic day, everyone. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. We will talk to you tomorrow at 10 a.m. And check us out on offthehooksports.com.